At its peak, Hardee's had more than 3,000 restaurants, and it was one of the largest hamburger chains in the entire United States. A genuine rival to McDonald's and Burger King. Billions of dollars in annual sales. Thousands of locations spread across the American South and Midwest. A place in the daily life of millions of families. On a weekday morning, a Hardee's parking lot was full of people getting a warm, made-from-scratch biscuit on the way to work. On a Friday night, it was full of families getting a charbroiled burger, flame-grilled over an open flame, a taste you couldn't get anywhere else. In the towns where it ruled, Hardee's wasn't just a fast food option. It was the fast food option, the local favorite, the place your family had always gone. Then, it nearly died. Through the 1990s, Hardee's collapsed so far and so fast that it became a national punchline, a chain of aging, dingy, confused restaurants that had lost any real sense of what it even was. Hemorrhaging money, closing locations, vanishing from whole regions of the country where it had once been loved. By the late 1990s, Hardee's was widely considered one of the worst-run major chains in America. A dying brand that most people assumed would simply disappear, the way so many fallen empires do. But here's the strange thing, the thing that makes Hardee's different from almost every other fallen restaurant empire. It didn't disappear. Hardee's is not a story of rise and fall. It's a story of rise and fall, and then one of the most improbable comebacks in the history of American fast food. A revival built on doing the exact opposite of what everyone said a struggling restaurant should do. While the entire industry was racing towards salads and grilled chicken and lighter, healthier menus, Hardee's turned around and bet its whole survival on the biggest, fattest, most indulgent, most unapologetic burger anyone had ever put on a fast food menu. And it worked. It genuinely worked. This is the story of a great American burger empire that rose to the top, nearly ate itself to death, and then clawed its way back from the grave by finally remembering exactly what it was. And to understand all of it, you have to start with a card game, because the man who founded Hardee's lost the entire company at a poker table. Wilbur Hardee opened the first Hardee's in Greenville, North Carolina, in September of 1960. 15-cent hamburgers, 10-cent fries, 20-cent milkshakes, charcoal-broiled burgers that people lined up for. And within about a year, the thing was such a hit that two ambitious businessmen came calling to partner up and expand it. Not long after that partnership formed, Wilbur Hardee, by his own account, sat down for a fateful night of poker, lost badly, and signed away his controlling interest in the company that bore his own name. Within a couple of years of founding it, he was essentially out, and from that point on, Hardee's was a company, not a man, built and run by operators focused on one thing: expansion. That early loss of the founder is really where the chain's story begins, because it meant Hardee's grew up as a pure growth machine. And it's the two things that machine got right early on that explain everything about the rise, the fall, and the revival that followed. The first thing was the burger itself, and specifically how it was cooked. From the very beginning in that first Greenville restaurant, Hardee's charcoal broiled its burgers. Instead of frying the patties on a flat metal griddle the way almost every other fast food chain did, Hardee's cooked them over an open charbroiler, a flame. And that one difference changed everything about the product. A griddle-fried patty is fine, but it tastes like fast food. A flame-grilled patty picks up char, picks up smoke, picks up that specific slightly blackened backyard cookout flavor that people associate with a summer grill, with a steak, with real cooking. It made a Hardee's burger genuinely taste different from a McDonald's burger, and better in the eyes of a whole lot of customers. That charbroiled flavor was the chain's original signature, its first real competitive weapon, the thing that set it apart in a crowded field from day one. The chain took off, spreading fast across the Southeast and into the Midwest through the 1960s and 70s. And crucially, it often got to these markets early, planting itself in towns and small cities before McDonald's or Burger King had fully arrived. That head start mattered enormously. In a lot of southern and Midwestern towns, Hardee's wasn't just one fast food option among many. It was the first one, the local favorite, the place that won people's loyalty before the national giants showed up to compete for it. That deep regional loyalty across the South and the heartland became the bedrock the whole empire was built on. And it's worth understanding just how deep that loyalty ran, because it explains both the height of the rise and the sting of the fall. When a chain is the first one in town, it doesn't just get customers, it gets woven into the fabric of a place. It becomes where the high school kids go after the Friday night football game, where the old men gather for coffee in the morning, where a family stops every Sunday after church, where you had your first job at 16. For a lot of small towns, the local Hardees was a genuine community institution, as much a fixture as the church or the county fair. That kind of loyalty, rooted in habit and memory and belonging, not in advertising, is the most valuable thing a restaurant can have. And it's exactly the kind of loyalty the national giants arriving later could rarely match. But the single smartest thing Hardee's ever built, the second pillar of the empire, came in the 1970s, the made-from-scratch biscuit. This is a genuinely important piece of fast food history. In the 1970s, Hardee's pioneered the made-from-scratch breakfast biscuit. Real biscuits, made fresh in each restaurant every single morning from scratch, the way a Southern grandmother would make them. Warm, flaky, buttery, tender. And they built a whole breakfast menu around them. Sausage biscuits, bacon biscuits, egg biscuits, the famous cinnamon and raisin biscuit, a sweet breakfast treat people adored. Let me linger on that biscuit, because for a huge number of Americans, it's the thing Hardee's really means, the memory that comes back before any burger does. Picture a southern morning, early, before the heat sets in. A worker on the way to a shift, a farmer, a family heading out, pulling into a Hardee's when the sky is still gray. And inside, someone has been up since well before dawn, rolling out dough by hand, cutting the rounds, sliding the trays into the oven, because these biscuits were not shipped in frozen and reheated. They were genuinely made from scratch in that building, that morning. So when you bit into one, it was warm all the way through, flaky outside, soft and tender inside, the butter melting, the sausage hot and savory against the sweet bread. That is not fast food in the cynical sense. That is something closer to a real breakfast, the kind a grandmother might make, handed to you through a drive-through window for pocket change. For millions of people across the South and Midwest, that warm, from-scratch biscuit on an early morning is a core memory, a small daily comfort, the taste of the start of a working day. And in pure business terms, the biscuit was arguably the most valuable thing the chain ever built. It played directly to Hardee's southern roots, where the biscuit is a sacred food. It gave people a reason to come in the morning, not just at lunch, and it was genuinely, noticeably better than the mass-produced breakfast breads at other chains. The made-from-scratch biscuit made Hardee's a legitimate breakfast leader, one of the very few burger chains where breakfast became a huge, defining part of the business. Even today, decades later, breakfast accounts for something like 45% of Hardee's sales, an unusually high proportion in the industry, and it all traces back to that decision to make real biscuits from scratch. And here's why owning breakfast mattered so much. It's a genuine strategic advantage most competitors never matched. The lunch and dinner burger business is the most brutally competitive space in all of fast food. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, a dozen others, all fighting over the same midday customer, all discounting, all clawing for the same dollar. But breakfast, for a long time, was a much softer, less crowded battlefield. By owning breakfast, and owning it with a genuinely superior product, Hardee's gave itself a whole second stream of revenue and a loyal morning customer that many burger chains simply never developed. It also created a daily habit, and the person who stops every single workday morning for a sausage biscuit is worth far more than the occasional lunch visitor. The biscuit wasn't just food, it was a moat. So by the early 1980s, Hardee's was riding high. Thousands of restaurants, a distinctive charbroiled burger, a beloved industry-leading biscuit breakfast, deep regional loyalty across the South and Midwest. It was one of the great American fast food success stories, a genuine giant. And then it made the decision that would nearly destroy it, a decision that seemed at the time like the natural next step for a conquering empire. Hardee's went shopping. It decided to grow not by building new Hardees, but by buying up other fast food chains and converting them. And that acquisition binge, more than anything else, is what triggered the long, brutal fall. Here's what happened. Starting in the 1980s and continuing into the 90s, Hardee's went on an aggressive acquisition spree, gobbling up other struggling or available restaurant chains and converting their locations into Hardee's. It bought the Sandy's chain. It bought Burger Chef, the once mighty chain that had invented the kids' meal, now fading, its hundreds of locations absorbed and converted. In 1990, it made its biggest move of all, acquiring around 650 Roy Rogers restaurants, the popular roast beef and fried chicken chain, especially beloved in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And for a period, Hardee's even owned Rack's Roast Beef, folding roast beef sandwiches into the menu. On paper, this looked like brilliant, aggressive expansion. Hardee's was eliminating competitors and instantly gaining thousands of new locations in new regions, its yearly sales surpassing $4 billion. It looked like an empire on the march. In reality, it was the beginning of the end, and the reason why is a lesson every restaurant company should study. Because when you buy a beloved regional chain and forcibly convert it into your own brand, you don't just gain their locations, you inherit their customers' expectations, and then you betray them. Consider the Roy Rogers acquisition, which became infamous. Roy Rogers was genuinely loved in the Northeast. People had deep loyalty to its specific fried chicken, its roast beef, its fixings bar, its whole identity. And when Hardee's bought those 650 locations and started converting them into Hardee's, those loyal Roy Rogers customers were furious. They didn't want a Hardee's. They wanted their Roy Rogers. They wanted the chicken they loved, the roast beef they loved, the brand they'd been loyal to for years. And suddenly, it was gone, replaced by a southern burger and biscuit chain they had no attachment to, and in many cases, no interest in. The backlash was so severe that the conversion became a genuine debacle. Many of those converted locations bled customers and money. In some cases, the Roy Rogers loyalty was so fierce that locations were eventually converted back, or the whole misadventure had to be unwound. Hardee's had paid a fortune to acquire beloved customers and had promptly alienated them by taking away the thing they were loyal to. But the deeper damage from all these acquisitions wasn't just angry Roy Rogers fans. It was something worse and more insidious. Hardee's lost its own identity. Think about what the company had become. It was trying all at once to be a charbroiled burger chain and a Southern biscuit breakfast chain, and now also a roast beef chain from the Roy Rogers and Rack's acquisitions, and a fried chicken operation using the Roy Rogers recipe to try to compete with KFC. The menu became a bloated, confused mess. The brand no longer stood for any one clear thing. Was Hardee's a burger place, a breakfast place, a roast beef place, a chicken place? It was trying to be all of them, and in trying to be everything, it became nothing in particular, a muddled, unfocused chain with no clear reason to exist, no sharp identity, no single thing it was known for and great at. And there's a lesson in that dilution that runs deeper than Hardee's, one that applies to almost every fallen chain. A brand is, at bottom, a promise, a single clear idea that lives in a customer's head. McDonald's means fast, cheap, consistent, the same burger and fries everywhere. That clarity is the whole asset. It's the reason a customer picks you out of a dozen options without even thinking about it. And the fastest way to destroy that asset is to blur it, to keep adding and adding until the brand means nothing sharp at all. Hardee's spent the 1980s doing exactly that, piling roast beef and fried chicken and a half-dozen absorbed identities on top of what had been a crisp, clear promise, until a customer could no longer say what Hardee's even was. When people can't tell you what you're for, they stop choosing you. Not in a dramatic rush, but quietly, one skipped visit at a time, until the parking lots that used to be full on a Friday night are half empty, and nobody can quite say when it happened. There's a bitter irony in it, too, because the acquisitions were supposed to make Hardee's bigger and stronger, and instead they made it weaker. Every chain it swallowed added locations to the count, and for a while the growing number of restaurants made everything look healthy from the outside. But underneath, each acquisition was diluting the brand, straining the operation, alienating another set of loyal customers, and stretching the company thinner. Hardee's was getting bigger and sicker at the same time, the restaurant count climbing even as the soul of the thing drained away. It's one of the great traps in business, confusing size with strength, mistaking the act of growing for the fact of being healthy. Hardee's grew itself right to the edge of the grave. The charbroiled burger, the thing that had made Hardee's special from the very beginning, got lost in the noise. At some point in the drive for efficiency and cost-cutting, the company even abandoned charbroiling, its original secret, the whole point of the brand, in favor of cheaper, faster cooking methods. The soul of the company was being sold off piece by piece in the name of growth, and it all showed up where it always shows up, in the restaurants themselves. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Hardee's restaurants developed a genuinely terrible reputation. They were widely seen as old, dated, dingy, poorly maintained, and inconsistent. The food quality slipped, the service slipped, the buildings aged and weren't renovated. A brand that had once been a proud regional champion became, in the public mind, a tired and slightly grim place, the fast food restaurant you went to only if there was nothing else around. The company was owned during this period by a Canadian conglomerate called Imasco, which also owned Burger Chef and other holdings, and under that ownership, Hardee's drifted, unfocused and declining, losing money and losing its way. Sales fell year after year. Locations closed. Hardee's retreated from entire regions. In places like South Florida, it simply vanished, disappearing completely from markets where it had once been common. The great empire was crumbling, and by the mid-1990s it looked like a chain in a death spiral, one of the worst-performing major brands in the entire industry. A company that had forgotten what it was and was paying the ultimate price for that amnesia. This is the low point, an empire that had grown too fast and too sloppily, that had eaten a half-dozen other chains and lost itself in the process, that had abandoned its own signature and confused its own customers. Aging restaurants, falling sales, a ruined reputation, whole regions abandoned. By the mid-1990s, Hardee's was, by most measures, a dying company. And in most of these stories, this is where it ends, with the slow fade, the bankruptcy, the shrinking to a nostalgic remnant. But Hardee's story doesn't end here, because in 1997, someone bought this broken, dying company who had a genuinely radical idea about how to save it. In April of 1997, a California fast food company called CKE Restaurants bought Hardee's for around $327 million. CKE was the parent company of Carl's Jr., the West Coast burger chain built by a legendary restaurateur named Carl Karcher. And the merger created a combined chain of nearly 4,000 restaurants, a huge Hardee's presence in the South and Midwest, and a strong Carl's Jr. presence in California and the West. On paper, it was a coast-to-coast burger giant. In reality, CKE had just bought a dumpster fire, a beaten-down, money-losing, identityless chain that most of the industry had written off. The question was, what on earth they were going to do with it. And it's worth appreciating just how bad the situation was that CKE had walked into, because it makes the turnaround that followed all the more remarkable. This wasn't a healthy company with one fixable problem. This was thousands of aging, run-down restaurants scattered across dozens of states, staffed and operated inconsistently, serving a confused menu to a customer base that was steadily abandoning it, all under a brand name that had become synonymous with dinginess and decline. Carl's Jr. itself, the acquirer, was a solid but regional chain, much smaller than the wounded giant it had just swallowed. So CKE had, in effect, bet its own future on fixing a company far bigger and far sicker than itself. If the turnaround failed, it wouldn't just be Hardee's that went down. It could drag Carl's Jr. and the whole company with it. This was not a safe, incremental acquisition. It was a high-wire act, a bet the company gamble on the idea that this broken brand still had something real underneath the wreckage worth saving. Most observers, reasonably, expected it to fail. The company's leadership, under an executive named Andrew Puzder, who rose to run CKE, made a series of decisions that were, frankly, the opposite of conventional wisdom, and that added up to one of the boldest bets in fast food history. The first thing they did was go back to the beginning, all the way back to the original recipe for success. They reinstated charbroiling. They brought back the flame-grilled cooking method that had been Hardee's original secret, the thing that had made the burgers special in 1960 and had been abandoned in the years of cost-cutting and drift. It was a recognition of something profound, that the company's salvation lay not in chasing some new trend, but in recovering the thing that had made it great in the first place. Hardee's would once again be the chain with the genuinely distinctive, flame-broiled, backyard cookout-tasting burger. And then they made the decision that everyone thought was insane. They decided that Hardee's would not compete on cheapness, or on speed, or, heaven forbid, on health. Instead, Hardee's would go all in on being the place for a big, premium, indulgent, genuinely satisfying burger. In 2003, they introduced the Thick Burger, a line of large, charbroiled black Angus beef burgers, thick and substantial and unapologetically hearty, priced higher than typical fast food because they were bigger and better. And then, to make the statement completely unmissable, they created the Monster Thick Burger, an absolutely enormous burger, 2 thick charbroiled beef patties, 4 strips of bacon, 3 slices of cheese, mayonnaise, all on a buttered bun, clocking in at well over 1,000 calories in a single sandwich. Now understand the context, because this is what made it so audacious. This was the early 2000s. America was in the grip of a massive health and anti-obesity panic. There were documentaries about the dangers of fast food. There were lawsuits blaming fast food for obesity. Every single competitor was scrambling to add salads, to add grilled chicken, to add apple slices, to advertise how light and healthy and responsible their menus were. The entire industry was running as fast as it could toward health. And into the middle of all that, Hardee's marched out a 2-patty, 4 strips of bacon, 1,000+ calorie Monster Thick Burger, and instead of hiding from the calorie count, they bragged about it. They ran ads openly calling it a decadent, gluttonous, over-the-top indulgence. Their entire message was, essentially, everyone else is selling you rabbit food and feeling guilty about it. We are selling you a real, enormous, delicious burger, and we are not going to apologize for it one bit. It was a brilliant piece of counterpositioning, and the logic behind it was genuinely smart. The team understood something the rest of the industry had missed. All those competitors racing toward salads were fighting over the same shrinking territory, all trying to appeal to the health-conscious customer. But there was a huge, underserved, largely ignored market on the other side. People, and especially young men who did not go to fast food for a salad. They went for an indulgent treat. They wanted a big, satisfying, delicious burger, and they were tired of being made to feel guilty about it. Hardee's decided to plant its flag firmly with those customers, the young hungry guys, as the strategy was often described, and to own the indulgence lane completely, precisely because everyone else had abandoned it. In a market full of restaurants apologizing for their food, Hardee's would be the one restaurant that celebrated it. There's a deep piece of business wisdom buried in that move, and it's worth drawing out because it explains why the gamble worked when it looked so reckless. When every competitor in a market crowds toward the exact same position, in this case, healthy and responsible, they don't actually make themselves distinct. They make themselves interchangeable. A dozen chains all offering the same apologetic salads and grilled chicken wraps become a blur, competing on tiny differences, all chasing the same anxious customer. And in their stampede toward that one position, they leave a whole other position wide open, completely undefended. The customer who wants a giant, indulgent, delicious burger still exists. That hunger didn't go away just because the industry got nervous about it. But suddenly nobody was serving that customer with any conviction. Everybody was too busy apologizing. So Hardee's walked into that empty, undefended territory and simply owned it, all of it, with no competition, because it was the only major chain brave enough to stand there. Being different, being polarizing, being the one that a specific group of people loved precisely because everyone else had abandoned them. That turned out to be worth more than being one more face in the healthy crowd. The lesson is almost a paradox. In a market where everyone is chasing the same customer, the biggest opportunity is often the customer everyone else decided to ignore. And they backed it with some of the most talked about, most controversial advertising in fast food history. The Hardees and Carl's Jr. marketing became famous or infamous for its racy commercials, ads featuring beautiful women in very little clothing sensually eating enormous burgers. The most legendary of these featured Paris Hilton at the absolute height of her fame, washing a car in a swimsuit while eating a Hardee's burger, an ad so provocative it generated an enormous amount of controversy and, crucially, an enormous amount of free publicity. People were outraged, people were talking, and every bit of that outrage and talk put Hardee's back on the map, made it culturally relevant again, got the brand mentioned everywhere. It was cheap, it was shameless, and in pure marketing terms, it was devastatingly effective. The ads matched the food perfectly. Big, indulgent, unapologetic, aimed squarely at young men, impossible to ignore. And here is the remarkable thing. It worked, all of it. The revival was real. The thick burgers steadily built up Hardee's lunch and dinner business, giving people a genuine reason to come back. A premium, charbroiled, indulgent burger you couldn't get at McDonald's. The provocative marketing made the brand relevant and talked about again. The reinstated charbroiling restored the quality and the identity. And Hardee's still had its secret weapon, the made-from-scratch biscuit, anchoring a breakfast business that remained one of the strongest in the industry. Piece by piece, the dying chain came back to life. Sales recovered. The reputation slowly rebuilt. The company that had been a punchline in the 1990s became, in the 2000s, a genuine turnaround success story, studied and admired across the industry. Against every expectation, Hardee's had risen from the dead. And the revival restored more than sales. It restored the chain to relevance in the exact culture that had written it off, turning the worst-run major brand of the 1990s into one of the most studied turnarounds of the 2000s. A dead chain had been brought back not by reinventing itself into something new, but by recovering the flame-grilled burger it had always been and pushing it harder than anyone else dared. For years after the turnaround, Hardee's and Carl's Jr. operated as essentially twin brands under CKE. The same menu, the same thick burgers, the same Happy Star logo, the same racy marketing, just different names in different regions. Hardee's in the South and Midwest, Carl's Jr. in the West. Together, they'd been nursed back to health by the same bold, indulgent, unapologetic strategy. But that strategy, the racy marketing in particular, eventually created a tension of its own. In 2018, CKE decided to pull the two brands apart, at least in their marketing. The company announced that Carl's Jr. and Hardee's would go their separate ways in terms of advertising, and it stepped away from the provocative, sexually charged ads that had defined the comeback era. The reasoning was that the racy, young, hungry guys marketing, whatever it had done for the turnaround, was ultimately incompatible with a family-oriented chain like Hardee's, especially in its wholesome Southern and Midwestern strongholds. The Paris Hilton era was over. Hardee's would pivot back toward family, toward its biscuits, toward its Southern roots and its regular customers. And that's roughly where Hardee's sits today. A survivor, a genuine survivor, still operating thousands of restaurants across the United States and, increasingly, around the world, especially throughout the Middle East, where the brand has expanded aggressively and thrived. It's still built around that charbroiled thick burger and that made-from-scratch biscuit. It has settled into a stable, mature identity after decades of chaos. It is neither the soaring giant of its peak nor the dying punchline of its nadir, but something in between, a solid, enduring, mid-major American burger chain that went to the very edge of death and came back. So what's the lesson of Hardee's? What does this strange, three-act story actually teach? The fall teaches one thing with total clarity. The deadliest thing a successful brand can do is forget what it is. Hardee's didn't fall because its core product was bad. The charbroiled burger and the made-from-scratch biscuit were genuinely excellent, genuinely beloved. It fell because, in its hunger for growth, it lost its identity. It bought up other chains and tried to be all of them at once. It converted beloved competitors and betrayed their loyal customers. It bloated its menu into confusion. It abandoned its own signature char-broiling to cut costs. It stopped being a clear, sharp, confident thing and became a muddled, unfocused everything and nothing, and its customers, sensing that the brand no longer knew what it stood for, drifted away. The acquisition binge that looked like triumphant expansion was actually a slow act of self-erasure. Growth for its own sake, without a clear identity underneath it, is not strength. It's a dilution that can kill. And the revival teaches the opposite, equally powerful lesson. Sometimes salvation lies not in chasing the crowd, but in boldly being exactly what you are, more than anyone else dares to. When CKE saved Hardee's, they didn't do it by following the industry toward salads and health and apology. They did it by recovering the brand's original strength, the charbroiled burger, and then doubling down on indulgence so hard, so unapologetically, that they owned an entire market segment everyone else had abandoned in fear. They understood that in a world where every competitor was trying to be the same safe, healthy, inoffensive thing, the boldest and most profitable move was to be loudly, proudly different, to give a specific group of customers exactly what they actually wanted and were being denied everywhere else. Hardee's was saved by conviction, by a willingness to be polarizing, by the courage to say, "This is what we are, and we're not sorry." There's a deeper truth underneath both lessons, and it's this. Hardee's nearly died when it tried to be everything to everyone, and it came roaring back the moment it decided to be one bold thing to a specific someone. The whole arc, the rise on a distinctive charbroiled burger, the fall into an identityless muddle of a dozen absorbed brands, the revival on the most unapologetically indulgent burger in America, is really a single lesson told 3 times. Know what you are and have the courage to be it fully. The company knew what it was in 1960, a charbroiled burger and a from-scratch biscuit. It forgot that for a couple of decades and nearly perished, and it only survived by remembering. Somewhere in the South tonight, before dawn, someone is in a Hardee's kitchen rolling out biscuit dough by hand, the way it's been done since the 1970s. Cutting the rounds, sliding the trays into the oven, so that when the doors open, the biscuits come out warm and flaky and real, the same as they were when your grandparents stopped in on the way to work. And later, at lunch, the charbroiler will fire up, and a thick Angus patty will hit the grill and pick up that flame-grilled char. That char was the whole secret from the very beginning, 65 years ago. It was the thing that built the empire, the thing the company forgot, and the thing that finally brought it back. The empire rose on those 2 things, a flame-grilled burger and a from-scratch biscuit. It nearly died the moment it forgot them, buried under a pile of other people's brands and its own confusion. And it came back to life the instant it remembered exactly what it was and decided at last to stop apologizing for it. Hardee's is the rare fallen empire that got a second act, not because it found something new, but because it finally went home to what it had been all along.